Hello ladies, welcome to Homemakers Radio. I'm Mrs. Sherman and I am going to speak to you a little bit today and read you some stories, talk a little bit about homemaking and the things that we do to get ready. But first I want to show you my new Western dress that I finished sewing, and I'll try to get a full picture of it for you. It is done in a Western costume style and it has a print of Queen Anne's lace on it, so I want to show you my Queen Anne's lace bouquet that I picked this morning to go with, and also show you my teacup before you get busy working. And today I couldn't find one that actually had a Queen Anne's. Very difficult to find a teacup that was Queen Anne's laced flower on it, because there's a teacup called Queen Anne, and every time I typed that in, these Queen Anne teacups kept coming up, and they were all different flowers. So I picked this one today, and it was from Home Goods, one of Gracie Teaware. Doesn't have a name, but I think it's still a lovely cup, and it's dishwasher safe. It does have some gold on it. I'll get a bigger picture of that for you. And today I'm going to talk about the 3 things maybe that we can do in the home. And the first one is, if you feel you have no control over anything and you're rather feeling like, where do I start today? If you don't have a list ready, just start with getting your appearance ready. And why is that important? And I've heard people say, well, I don't want to worry about my appearance. That might be a sign of getting a little lax in everything else if you don't want to worry about your appearance. And some people think it's not intellectual enough, but we find plenty of evidence throughout the Bible when appearance was mandated by God, and when certain people had to wear certain types of garments, some of them very royal, some of them it was emphasized that they had to be clean. And the evidence is that clothing is something that we are saddled with here on this earth, and we have to care about what we look like and how we appear to other people, whether we are inspiring them or cheering them up. But I think mostly for the home, it's really important to dress up, because you can get lax. You can get to thinking, we're just going to laze around. Who cares? No one's going to see me. I will tell you, after all these things that have been going on where people have become confined and isolated, no one is going to say anything derogatory about being a homemaker, because people are finding out just what it takes to keep a home going, to keep it clean, to keep it a happy place, and to nurture people in it. So there's going to be an entirely different attitude. There might even be a wardrobe series of wardrobe items for the home. And I'm going to talk a little bit about dress, because I have made myself a schedule of appointments where online I can go and find a tutorial to learn something. So I will dress for it, and if I'm doing the exercise videos, I'll put my exercise clothes on, and then after that I may get dressed up in something nice and go to my cooking show and put an apron on and go to the kitchen and try to emulate all that and follow all the instructions. And so every video, and of course at my painting class I will wear something different, because I don't want to get paint on anything that I value, so on my clothes. So I think it is important, and especially if you're homeschooling, you can have a feeling, if you're not careful, of isolation. Now, we did take our children out to eat quite a bit to really nice places, nice restaurants. We thought we should at least do that, even if we cut corners here and there financially. We had some set aside that we could go to really nice places, because we wanted them to learn about eating in these places. But you can make a dress for dinner type of time in your home. I would suggest that you do that. And today I'm going to read out of a couple of books for you. And I also wanted to say that your attitude towards your homemaking, because we don't call it housekeeping. You could hire anybody to keep a house, but to homemake, I think you have to have a love for your things and for your house. And today I'm sitting in my cabin in the woods room. It's a teeny tiny little room that a bed barely fits in. I didn't quite know what to do with it, and it could have easily just become a catch-all storage room because it's so small. But it has an atmosphere now of being a cabin in the woods, and I've brought out all the things that I own that have that feeling to it. And later on, I'll take you to my lake house room. And I also have other rooms that I'm working on that have a different theme to them. So I've taken out all the children's toys and brought them in, and anything that looked like something more isolating and cabiny. It's kind of fun. So today I'm going to read to you. Now, we also discussed, besides homemaking, I had the three things: your appearance, homemaking, and dealing with people. But I haven't been doing the dealing with people thing very much because I've been reading from books which have this in them. And this is one of the things you'll want to do if you're homeschooling, is have some good things to read. And at first, read to your children so that they know how to do it. And teach them how to read so that while they're reading a few words, they look down the page and look down the line to see what's coming so they can read with understanding and expression. And it's really important that you do the reading at first because they will learn how to read from listening to you. They'll learn, this is more than just learning how to pronounce the words and to actually read and write. I had a mother who really read fluently, and she didn't go, I don't think, past the 7th grade, and she was raised in the prairies in Alberta, and she was she was a child of a mother who had been an orphan, and as I said, they loved the Anne of Green Gables. They just identified with it. And so, but today, first, I'm going to read Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington. Now, I know a lot of people have had a hard time finding this, and I think the web is real sensitive to that word slavery, so the book may be being published under a different name, like Booker T. Washington autobiography. But I wanted to tell you something that I noticed the other day about this title. Notice he said up from slavery. You know, he could have said out from slavery. There's a big difference because he was raising up his character. He was trying to help other people to grow in character and in skills and in service and in knowledge of the Bible and other things. And in this time, in 2020, I have cautioned you about wasting the time waiting for something to change in the world so that you could get on with your life, your freedom. I would say that you, instead of saying out of the house, say up, or out, you're out from confinement. Instead of saying I'm out of confinement, say I'm up from confinement, because that doesn't matter whether you are where you are located or where you have to be. So say up from confinement rather than out from confinement, and use the time to improve your understanding of life and of yourself, and to improve your flaws, to develop your character in many different ways. And one way to develop character is housekeeping and homemaking, and this man certainly found out some of these things, and that's why I'm reading them to you. I thought maybe you could apply them to yourself. Now, I am skipping around a little bit in this book and kind of going to where people have underlined it with their red pens, and thought, well, if they thought that was important, then I'll read that too. Now, I didn't always read all the books my children read, but I did have quite a stack of them for them to read, and there was no way I could possibly have read them all, but they would have had more reading time than I did. So he talks about, I left off about how he had been to this school called Hampton, and how then later on he wanted to build a school of his own called the Tuskegee Institute to help the people that were coming out of slavery to come up from it, and to build themselves up from it. And so I wanted to read a little bit about some of his struggles with this school that he was establishing and building, and it had to be a boarding school. So he was struggling with all kinds of different things, and I will read something here. He said, as soon as our first building was near enough to completion so that we could occupy a portion of it. Now, a lot of you who have built your own homes or are building your own homes might identify with some of this. And I like that he has written this in a sense of a day in the life of just ordinary little things. That's the way I wrote Just Breathing the Air. things I thought, that's not much of a story. What will I write about? Write about your daily things. And that was what that was about. As soon as our first building was near enough to completion so that we could occupy a portion of it, which was near the middle of the second year of school, we opened a boarding department. I still think Mr. Reagan should be reading these entries and read the whole book online. He seems to have the voice for it. And students had begun coming from quite a distance, and in such increasing numbers that we felt more and more that we were merely skimming over the surface, and that we were not getting hold of the students in their home life. I don't know what he meant by that, so we're going to read further and see what that was. We had nothing but the students and their appetite with which to begin a boarding department. No provision had been made in the new building for a kitchen and dining room, but we discovered that now this sounds rather depressing, but listen to this. We discovered that by digging out a large amount of earth from under the building, we could make a partially lighted basement room that could be used for a kitchen and dining room. Many of the kitchens were the darkest, deepest areas of the house, and I have visited historic home museum type places before and been astonished at the kitchens and how dark they were. And it was later on in the late 1800s that some people began making the kitchen white and light and airy and with plenty of sunlight in them. Again, I called on the students to volunteer for work, this time to assist in digging out the basements. This they did, and in a few weeks we had a place to cook and eat in, although it was very rough and uncomfortable. Anyone seeing the place now would never believe that it was once used for a dining room. The most serious problem, though, was to get the boarding department started off in a running order, with nothing to do in the way of furniture and with no money with which to buy anything. The merchants in the town would let us have what food we wanted on credit. In fact, in those earlier years, I was constantly embarrassed because people seemed to have more faith in me than I had in myself. It was pretty hard to cook, however, without stoves, and awkward to eat without dishes. At first the cooking was done out of doors, in the old-fashioned primitive style, in pots and skillets placed over a fire. Some of the carpenter's benches that had been used in the construction of the building were utilized for tables. As for dishes, there were too few to make it worthwhile to spend time in even describing them. No one connected to the boarding department seemed to have any idea that meals must be served at certain fixed and regular hours, and this was a source of great worry. Everything was so out of joint and so inconvenient that I felt safe in saying that for the first 2 weeks something was wrong at every meal. You know, it's like that with us too sometimes, isn't it? Either the meat was not done or had been burnt, or the salt had been left out of the bread, or the tea had been forgotten. Early one morning I was standing near the dining room door listening to the complaints of the students. The complaints that morning were especially emphatic and numerous, because the whole breakfast had been a failure. One of the girls, who had failed to get any breakfast, came out and went to the well to draw some water to drink to take the place of breakfast, which she had not been able to get. When she reached the well, she found that the rope was broken and she could get no water. She turned from the well and said in the most discouraged tone, not knowing that I was where I could hear her, she said, "We can't even get water to drink at this school." I think no remark ever came so near to discouraging me as that one. At another time, when Mr. Bedford, whom I've already spoken of as one of our trustees, and a devoted friend of the Institute, was visiting the school, he was given a bedroom immediately over the dining room. Early in the morning he was awakened by a rather animated discussion between two boys in the dining room below. The discussion was over the question as to whose turn it was to use the coffee cup that morning. One boy won the case by proving that for 3 mornings he had not had opportunity to use the cup at all. Can you imagine being in a place where there was only one vessel to drink out of? But gradually, by patience and hard work, we brought order out of chaos, just as will be true of any problem if we stick to it with patience and wisdom and earnest effort. Think about that with your homemaking. As I look back now over that part of our struggle, I am glad that we had it. I am glad that we endured all those discomforts and inconveniences. I am glad that our students had to dig out the place for their kitchen and dining room. I am glad that our first boarding place was in that dismal, ill-lighted, and damp basement. Had we started in a fine, attractive, convenient room, I fear we would have lost our heads and become stuck up. It means a great deal, I think, to start off on a foundation which one has made for one's self. When our old students return to Tuskegee now, as they often do, and go into our large, beautiful, well-ventilated and well-lighted dining room, and see tempting, well-cooked food, largely grown by the students themselves, and see tables, neat tablecloths and napkins, and vases of flowers upon the tables, and hear birds singing, and note that each meal is served exactly upon the minute, with no disorder, and with almost no complaint coming from the hundreds that now fill our dining room, they too often say to me that they are glad that we started as we did and built ourselves up year by year by a slow and natural process of growth. And now I'm going to skip over to something else here. And that is just a little paragraph here that impressed me about public speaking. And that was one thing that I insisted that all my children learn how to do is public speaking. And we had a book called Speech and Drama for Christian Schools. I can't remember who the publisher was, but it was excellent. And I had my children take books we already had and read them aloud or make a speech using some information in these books. And I taught them how to take a subject and introduce the subject and say what they were going to try to prove or talk about. And then the body of the subject using illustrations, using history, using personal experience, and using definitions. And then the summarizing statement, which was kind of a repeat of the introduction. And I never let them talk about something that we were going to have to guess where it was going, because they had to tell in the beginning what the subject was and what they were trying to prove. There could be a few surprises, but never ever allowed to take their audience on a long journey and then leave them hanging there, as so many of the modern books did. Okay, so this is called, and I look at some of my children's notes, does not know why they want to hear him speak. Okay, I wanted to read this and then we'll get on to Anne of Green Gables. I hope that you're getting something done while you listen, because there isn't anything to watch here. Now, I've had, emails and calls about, how to look better on the video, but actually this is like my hair, but this is to listen to, actually. And as I am approaching 70 years old, there's not going to be a great big improvement. I always think if I could just get younger and thinner and smarter and stronger, and then I'd look good on the videos, but it's not going to get any better. It's just going to deteriorate. Sorry about that. But this is for you to listen to. In my efforts on the public platform, I have never been able to understand why people come to hear me speak. This question I can never rid myself of. Time and time again, I have stood in the street in front of a building and have seen men and women passing in large numbers into the audience room where I was to speak, and have felt ashamed that I should be the cause of people, as it seemed to me, wasting a valuable hour of time. Some years ago, I was able to deliver an address before a society in Madison, Wisconsin. An hour before the time set for me to speak, a fierce snowstorm began and continued for several hours. I made up my mind that there would be no audience and that I should not have to speak. But, as a matter of duty, I went to the church and found it packed with people. The surprise gave me a shock that I did not recover from the whole evening. One of the things that Mr. S. taught me when I was really a lot younger was to be prepared for disappointment. He said, always prepare for the best, always hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And he said, if no one shows up to a Bible class or any kind of ladies class, Titus 2 class or something, or even a quilting class or a sewing class, if they don't show up, you go ahead and do it anyway, because it keeps you familiar with your lesson. And so, yes, I would go ahead and do it. And then if someone, maybe sometimes there's sabotage, sometimes people just a bit jealous. They don't want anyone to go to your class. And so they will ask, well, how did it go? And I always was told to say, it went just fine. And because you went ahead and had it. But this is interesting that he didn't think that anyone would come. People often ask me if I feel nervous before speaking, or else they suggest that since I speak so often, they suppose I could get used to it in answer to this question. And I have to say that I always suffer intensely from nervousness before speaking. More than once, just before I was to make an important address, this nervous strain has been so great that I have resolved never to speak again in public. And people have asked, how do you get over that anxiety and that nervous feeling when you're entertaining and you're expecting someone and you're getting everything ready and you want it to just be so? And do you ever get used to it? No, it just, in every incident of entertaining or hospitality is absolutely fresh and new and so different that I never really get used to it. The only thing you can get used to is a menu that you use, or the way that you clean your house. You can develop or the way that you dress or prepare yourself, and that is what you can get used to. And so that's why these rituals and these habits are so important in the home. More than once, just before I was to make an important address, the nervous strain had been so great I have resolved never again to speak in public. I not only feel nervous before speaking, but after I've finished, I usually feel a great sense of regret, because it seems to me that if I had left out of my address and the main thing and the best thing I had meant to say, well, that always happens, doesn't it? That things that you forget to tell people. There is a great compensation, though, for the preliminary nervous suffering that comes to me after I have been speaking for about 10 minutes, and have come to feel that I have really mastered my audience, and that we have gotten into full and complete sympathy with each other. It seems to me there is rarely a combination of mental and physical delight in any effort as that which comes to a public speaker when he feels he has a great audience and they are completely within his control. Although there are certain things, such as pauses, and see, this was really important for my homeschool. As my children got older, they needed to be able to speak, because you reach an awkward stage, maybe as a child, where in public or around other people, especially adults, that you stammer and you look down on the floor, and we didn't want that to happen. So he said there are certain things although there are certain things such as pauses, breathing, and pitch of voice that are very important, none of these can take the place of the soul in an address. When I have an address to deliver, I like to forget all about the rules and make the audience forget about these things too, and attend to the subject. Now here's something really interesting. I also wanted to read a little bit about how he used I hope I haven't lost my page here, because I have the strangest bookmarks here. I've a bit of Kleenex and a ticket and a bit of different things, and where I had marked where he had gone outside, and the very important thing was for him to spend time with his children outside. And I don't know if I have lost that or not. Nothing tends to throw me off my balance so quickly when I am speaking as to have someone leave the room. We were taught so much about this. When you go to church, especially when you sit down, you don't move, you stay there. Don't get up, start walking around and run to the foyer or run to the bathroom and everything, because it spoils the concentration of the speaker, and also makes him feel like that he's not interesting enough, or that it's boring. To prevent this, I make up my mind as a rule that I will try to make my address so interesting, will try to state so many interesting facts, one after another, that no one can leave. The average audience, I have come to believe, wants facts rather than generalities or sermonizing. Most people, I think, are able to draw proper conclusions if they're given the facts in an interesting form on which to base them. As to the kind of audience that I would like best to talk to, I would put at the top of the list an organization of strong, wide-awake businessmen, such, for example, that is found in Chicago, Boston, and Buffalo. I have found no other audience so quick to see a point and so responsive. Well, that's what the West is built on, isn't it? Business. Within the last few years, I've had the privilege of speaking before most of the leading organizations of this kind in large cities of the United States. The best time to get a hold of an organization of businessmen is after a good dinner, although I think that one of the worst instruments of torture that was ever invented is the custom which makes it necessary for a speaker to sit through a 14-course dinner every minute of the time feeling sure that his speech is going to prove a dismal failure and disappointment. I rarely take part in one of these long dinners that I do not wish that I could put myself back in the little cabin where I was a slave boy and go again through the experience there, one that I shall never forget, of getting molasses to eat once a week from the big house. Our usual diet on the plantation was cornbread and pork, but on Sunday morning my mother was permitted to bring down a little molasses from the big house for her 3 children. That's what we called our homestead in Alaska, was the big house, because as opposed to the little cabin that was temporary that we were living in while the big house was being built. Our usual diet on the let's see. And how well the molasses was received, and I did wish that every day was Sunday. I would get my tin plate and hold it up for the sweet morsel, which I would always shut my eyes while the molasses was being poured onto the plate. Molasses is from sugar cane. With the hope that when I opened my eyes, I would be surprised to see how much I had got. When I opened my eyes, I would tip the plate in one direction and another, as so to make the molasses spread all over it, in the full belief that there would be more of it and that it would last longer if spread out in this way. So strong are my childish impressions of those Sunday morning feasts that it would be pretty hard for anyone to convince me that there is not more molasses on a plate when it's spread around than when it occupies a little corner. At any rate, I have never believed in cornering syrup. My share of the syrup was usually about 2 tablespoonsful, and those 2 tablespoons of molasses were much more enjoyable to me than a 14-course dinner after which I am to speak. You know, this is one reason I tell you, children don't really care how fine their house is, or how rich everybody is, or what kind of clothes they wear, so much as they want a happy, carefree childhood, free from worry and heavy responsibility. And look how I've said it is something you can think back on when you need some kind of relief from the hardship of this world. And I wish I had marked what scripture it is in I believe it's in Ecclesiastes, where it talks about remember the days of your youth before the hard times come. And I emphasize that with my kids. There will be hard times, so remember the days of your youth and enjoy them before the hard times come. And it's just a wonderful gift you can give your children for them to fall back on. They don't necessarily have such bright, happy memories of some fantastic place they went as they do their home and the little things that they did. And if you'll close your eyes and think back to your first happy memory, it was probably so simple. Someone left a comment about this, I believe, or maybe it was an email someone sent me that was so sweet about how they were playing with their little toy kitchen, and they just felt blissfully happy and playing with the little dishes and putting them away, just things like that. So he had this memory of this molasses that they got on Sunday, which I thought is really precious. You never know what is honey to a child's heart, do you? Okay, so I'm going to try to find something he said about going outside and being with children, but I think I probably lost it. Here it is where he says, the meetings have given Mrs. Washington and myself an opportunity to get first-hand accurate information as to the real condition of the race by seeing the people in their homes, their churches, their Sunday schools, and their places of work, as well as in the prisons and dens of crime. These meetings also give us an opportunity to see the relations that exist between the races. I have never felt so hopeful about the races as I do after being engaged in a series of these meetings. He was talking about a series of meetings that took place, and he said, in the afternoon, Mrs. Washington would speak to the women alone, and in the evenings I spoke to a large mass meeting. In almost every case, the meetings have been attended not only by the colored people in large numbers, but by white people. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, for example, there was present at the mass meeting an audience of not less than 3,000 persons, and I was informed that 800 of these were white. I have done no good work that I really enjoyed more than this, or that I think has accomplished more good. And I wanted to read more about, his observations about this. And how he tried to lift his people up, and even the women. He had a passage in here about the women and their role. So I'm going to read one more part here because there's a little addendum part here that talked about the history by the publisher here. And it says here, this is interesting. A sense of mystery pervades the first paragraph of this autobiography. Washington does not know the exact place or date of his birth. He suspects he must have been born somewhere at some time. To this initial sense of mystery, the second paragraph adds the quality of life, desolate poverty, and the third paragraph his anonymous ancestry. Although Washington knew his mother's name, he admits, of my father I knew even less than of my mother. I do not even know his name. The prominent leader enters the drama of life as a semi-orphan, mysteriously from nowhere, secured by no ancestral roots, envisioned by humble conditions. This beginning sharpens the contrast with his social position 50 years later at the time of writing, and underscores the fact that whatever he achieved single-handedly. Now, I wanted to read just a little bit. I'm so sorry I've lost the part where he talked about his life with his children and how he. I'll just tell you what I remember. He insisted that every day they go outside and go into nature, if possible, somewhere near nature, to appreciate nature. And I suppose he got a lot of his inspiration from George Washington Carver, who was a friend of his. And he really wanted his children to love nature. And so he talks about going to Europe, and he says, before going to Europe, some events came into my life which were great surprises to me. In fact, my whole life has largely been one of surprises. I believe that any man's life will be filled with constant, unexpected encouragements of this kind if he makes up his mind to do his level best each day of his life. That is, tries to make each day reach as nearly as possible the high water mark of pure, unselfish, useful living. Okay, that would be a statement that we would probably pull out of this book, write it down, or discuss it with the children. And how can you make this come to life? How can you make each day of your life reach as nearly as possible the high water mark of pure, unselfish, useful living? I pity the man, black or white, who has never experienced the joy and satisfaction that come to one by reason of an effort to insist in making someone else more useful and more happy. Now, my bookmark fell out, and I will read more about that to you. Now, I'm going to take a little break here and show you some things. I know that this is a listening video, but I'm going to show you a few things about some of the things that are more economical here. Now, we were all very happy to find these paper towels that tear off a smaller piece because it's not so wasteful. And also, you don't have to keep a great big piece that looks so ugly just laying there because it didn't quite get completely used up or wet. But There's now another one on the market that they're hard to find, but they tear off in fourths. So that's nice. And I like to take this one and put it under my teacup on the saucer just to kind of absorb any of the moisture, the water there, and just for little dips and dabs of things. They're very hard to find, and I believe they're by a company called Brawny, but they might be others around, imitations of it. And then the other thing I wanted to show you, I didn't bring the actual, but you can, the students at school had fruit cups that the parents would put in their lunches. It has a little uh, thing on the top to peel off, and then there's fresh fruit in here. And they come in a 6-pack. I didn't bring in the actual one with the label. But these little cups, mostly they throw them away. But why do that when you can put them in the dishwasher? You can put all these cups in the dishwasher. You can wash them really good, stack them up like this, and then use them as cups, bathroom cups. So these go by the sink, and they're used for, the toothbrush and for washing the mouth out with, or little drinking cups, and then they can throw them away. So that's what I use them for, and I just wanted to tell you about this because also these are good for, now the reason we get them is because if Mr. S wants a quick snack and he's in a hurry, they're convenient for him. Now for me, I prefer, cut up a piece of fresh fruit, but he likes these. So another thing they do when I have my painting class, I use this for my water, one of these for my water, and they also are so good that you can put one of those wax melts in it and put it over your little heater plate that you put your wax melts on, and these won't disintegrate. I don't know what they're made out of, but it's a shame to throw them, away in the landfill. And we can use them for all kinds of things. You can use them to start a plant in, put some holes in the bottom. And if you've got any more ideas, let me know. But these are in the bathroom as what we call Dixie cups right now. And ladies, I have to go. I'll have to read Adam Green Gables to you in the next one. Thank you. Goodbye.